guys, and welcome back to Now Showing with John and Cam. And on today's episode, we are going to be doing our top 5 Stephen King film adaptations of all time. Right now, as we all know, Stephen King is in a renaissance, so to speak. A lot of his movies are being remade, which is always a good thing because he's one of the best, if not the best, horror authors of all time. And both John and myself, we've seen a lot of Stephen King's adaptations and are excited to talk about them with you today. And if you guys didn't get a chance to watch our premiere episode of Now Showing, please go back and check that out because it's going to teach you a lot about John and myself, our history, what this channel is going to be about. And but let's get down to it, John. How about I start us off with our top 5 countdown? My number 5 Stephen King adaptation, best adaptation of all time, is actually going to come from a Stephen King short story that was made into a feature film. And for some reason, this film was completely shit on when it came out, and I never understood it because when I saw it in theaters, it blew me away, and I still love watching it today. And that is Frank Darabont's The Mist. The Mist is a film about a cloud of mist or fog that comes through a small town in Maine, and it is not your ordinary fog. It happens to be filled with creatures from another dimension that if you're caught in the mist, they will eat you alive. And in the film, there are a large group of characters that are trapped inside a grocery store that are fighting for their lives against these creatures in the mist. And within the store, the characters all have their reasons. Some believe the world's coming to an end. Others just want to escape, and it causes chaos. So not only do they have to worry about the creatures, but themselves. And on top of that, it has one of the most effective endings in not just horror movie history, but movie history. I guarantee you, if you've never seen The Mist, and we're not going to spoil it for you, please watch it because you will be floored by this ending. I saw it in theaters, and I was there by myself, and I just remember the guy behind me being like, holy shit, holy shit. And I'm sitting there with my heart pounding through my chest because I never expected the ending we got. And it's actually a completely different ending than what Stephen King wrote. His short story, it's one of the few times that I think the movie really outdoes the story because the story is very short. There's not much to it. They took and added so much more into the movie, and even Stephen King says he wishes he would have wrote the ending that they use in the movie because it's that good. Do you remember the first time you saw the Mist?
I also saw it in theaters, and pretty much the exact same thing. I didn't go by myself. I was with my dad, and that's who got me to horror movies. Like me, so. And it definitely, the ending, if you've never seen that movie, you need to watch it just for the ending alone. Yeah. But getting to the ending, you'll fall in love with the entire movie.
Yeah, I never understood why it got such terrible reviews. I remember going to see it like, oh man, I'm already like not really looking forward to this because people said such bad stuff about it. But trust me, if you've never seen The Mist, watch it. It's a great movie. It's got everything you want: sci-fi horror, violence, just total horror and dread, and the ending is just breathtaking. That's my number 5, The Mist.
Alright, so my number 5 is going to be a little bit shocking to some of the viewers and probably Cam. My number 5 is It.
What? That's your 5?
Reason behind that is I felt like it had to make the list.
Yeah.
That, needless to say, it had to make the list. But it was really hard for me to figure out where to put it, and if I was just putting it higher up the list just because of what it is.
Now, which version are we talking here? Are you?
I'm gonna actually just put them together.
Okay. Because
it's kind of hard to like really pick one over the other because they each do different things.
Yeah.
Perfectly. But if I was to have to pick between the two, I personally like the newer ones better, just for the grittiness and the grittiness alone. I like the more serious version of it than the more comedic that you get in the TV series. So yeah, my number 5 is It. I could make arguments for it being higher, but I had to have it on my list, and I just felt that the other movies on here, for me personally, like I said, this is my list.
Yeah.
The ones that are coming after this, I felt
More effective.
more affected me like when I saw them.
Gotcha. Don't agree with you, but I gotcha. I mean, I guarantee viewers you're with me on this one. There's no way.
I mean, I know I'm probably an army of one on this one.
Yes. Okay, so my number 4 is definitely not one of Stephen King's most popular novels, nor one of his most popular adaptations, but it was always one that I've enjoyed watching tremendously, and that is Silver Bullet. Silver Bullet came out in 1985, and it starred Corey Feldman, who in that time, everything he put out, and like I said, in my opinion, I was huge fans of not Corey Feldman, Corey Haim. I said Corey Feldman, Corey Haim, but anything Corey Feldman and Corey Haim put out that time was gold. And also it stars Gary Busey. Can't go wrong with Gary Busey. It was pre-accident, so he wasn't as insane.
If you don't know who Gary Busey is, look up Ginger Dead Man.
Yes, that was John's number 1 horror film of all time. No, it wasn't. But definitely check out our first episode so you can see what our favorite horror films of all time were. But with that being said, Silver Bullet, about a boy named Marty, played by Corey Haim. He's handicapped in a wheelchair, and his uncle, played by Gary Busey, is watching him over 4th of July weekend. His parents are away. He's watching him and his older sister, and there is a werewolf in town that is killing people viciously, and you got to kind of guess who the werewolf is, and it's kind of up to Marty, who's really the only person who knows that this werewolf's there, and no one else believes him.
Marty McFly?
Yes, exactly, and he gets out of the wheelchair and into a hoverboard in this film. But no, it's a great movie. It's got good, surprisingly good effects. It still holds up well. And I've always enjoyed, me personally, I'm a huge werewolf fan, even though there aren't very many good werewolf movies. I'll be the first to admit that, but this is definitely one of them. And if you've never seen Silver Bullet, definitely check it out.
Oh, yeah, definitely. As far as werewolf goes, I'd definitely put that one up there, for sure. So, my number 4, we have already talked about, and that's The Mist. The reason The Mist made my list, there's 2 movies on my list that made it cheap for just the sheer emotional impact that they have on you. And this happens to be one of them.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to get too much into it. Like we said before, this is one of the best unsung heroes in horror movies. I don't know why it doesn't get as much praise as it should, but definitely go check it out.
And when you're thinking about the ending too, you almost if you're just taking the ending into consideration, I almost want to move it up on my list. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's that good. I'm telling you guys, check it out.
It's literally probably one of the top 3 greatest endings in movies in general.
Yeah.
It's.
Yeah, and it'll sit with you, man. You will I remember days after seeing it, I was just doing whatever, and I'm just like, damn it,
Did that really happen?
Did that happen? But it's great. It's great. My number 3. And, I'm sure, any of you guys watching this, please give your top movies in the comments as well, because we'll certainly be reading them, and we'll reply and hopefully get to, see if you guys agree or disagree. And I'm sure for a lot of you, my number 3 would probably be your number 1. It may even be this guy's number 1. I have no idea, but I know it's definitely a lot of people's number 1, and that is The Shining.
Actually didn't make my list.
Whoa! Oh, see, that caught me off guard there. But The Shining, extremely popular, and it should be. Stanley Kubrick directed it. Stephen King actually hated Kubrick's version of the film because of how much he changed, but honestly, I think he changed a lot of it for the better. I've read The Shining, and I really do like and adore the novel, but I really like a lot of the changes they made for the film. As we all know, Kubrick's one of the greatest directors of all time, just the way he would take certain shots and make you feel at unease or uncomfortable with how things looked. The woman in the bathtub, not to get too spoiler heavy, that scene always freaked me out as a kid. The score to the movie is fantastic. Jack Nicholson is amazing. Shelley Duvall would get on my nerves at times, but she, if you've ever watched a documentary on The Shining, you know how much stress she was going through even behind the camera while making that film. But the story of the possessed hotel and what it does to the people that inhabit it is just such a great concept. Just the imagery in that movie is some of the best you'll ever see in a movie, horror movie or not. It has so much creepiness and great atmosphere. It's my wife's favorite horror movie of all time. She watches The Shining, honestly, probably a dozen times a year, if not more. She will watch it if it's on TV, and if it's on TV the next day, she'll put it on and she'll yell at me if I change the channel. And we have like 6 copies of it on DVD and Blu-ray just because of the case. It's bad. But The Shining is definitely a great movie. I've never held it at the top of the Stephen King echelon of films, but I love it, and I'm excited for the sequel, Dr. Sleep, coming out this November. Ewan McGregor. So yeah, number 3, The Shining.
Yeah, I mean, I can
didn't make your list.
It didn't.
Woo.
But my number 3 might be a little shocking to you. I'm a huge fan of anthology movies, which is probably a dead giveaway with what I'm about to say for you true fans out there and this guy right here. But my number 3 is Creepshow. I mean, Stephen King, and then Pittsburgh's very own George A. Romero. I mean, we're Pittsburgh boys, so I mean...
Yep. Zombie capital of the world.
Yes.
Pittsburgh, PA.
But Creepshow, not just for the fact that it's an anthology, but from what they pull, like, what they're actually, like, pulling from. I'm a huge comic book fan, so the EC Comics that they kind of based a lot of this off is kind of why I really like this movie. EC Comics, back in the day, they could get away with anything. You're talking back in the 10-cent comic days. They're actually the cause of why we have such regulations on comics today. If you ever look at a comic book, you'll see that little seal of approval. That's basically because of some of the old comics like House of Mystery, Tales of Suspense, and the EC Comics, because it all depicted bondage, just horrific, like axe murders and stuff. And they basically lawsuits, riots, and stuff started because they were corrupting the youth.
You still have any of these issues?
I do. I have full collections.
We gotta see these at some point in time for sure, because I've never seen these myself.
And also, for some of you that didn't know, they are bringing this back. Cam will have a little bit more information on that. But I just love the anthology of this, and just, you can't go wrong with those two great minds working together.
Yeah. Creepshow, for those of you who don't know, it's been reimagined. A whole new series is just debuted on Shudder. So for those of you who love Creepshow and want a chance to check it out, make sure you go on to Shudder.com and subscribe. You can also get Shudder through Amazon Prime if you have Amazon Prime. I myself have Shudder as well as John. We haven't checked out the premiere episode yet, but we're certainly going to be doing that, and we'll talk about it very shortly on an episode with you guys. Greg Nicotero at the helm, one of the most famous makeup and visual effects artists out there, is helming the series. And from what I've heard, the first episode has gotten really good reviews, and they plan on having a lot of cameos from people who were in the original Creepshow as well.
That'll be cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll definitely be checking that out. I've always loved Creepshow as well. I agree. It was very hard not to put it on my list. It came very close to making it.
That's another one that kind of gets shit on a little bit.
It does. It does. And so it's an anthology, so there's different horror stories all broken up throughout it. The one that Stephen King plays in himself as a man that starts turning into a plant, that one's kind of comical and in many ways dumb. But there are some really good ones. My personal favorite's The Crate, which is about a crate that gets shipped in and stored in the cellar, and there's a monster inside.
Like a couple of emeralds.
That I, as a kid, always kind of thought resembled a werewolf, so that's what drew me to it a little bit more. And But there's some really good ones in there with bugs and people returning from the dead, and it's a really great anthology movie. There are sequels as well, not nearly as good, but definitely check out Creepshow for sure.
And then also for our Funko collectors,
Yes.
if you haven't heard, I believe it's February 2020. Don't quote me on that. I do know it is 2020 is the release for it. Is they're actually going to do a Funko of the Creepshow. If you haven't seen it, check out. It is pretty sweet.
Maybe we can put a link in the description below. We'll have a link to Funko's site where we can show you guys what it looks like, because it's going to be an awesome Funko for sure. Definitely one both John and myself will be getting. Okay, so we are on. We have number 2.
We're on number two.
All right, number 2. In my opinion, one of the creepiest movies ever made. Still extremely effective. A lot of people say it doesn't hold up well, and because of one of the characters, some people say it's even comical. But I don't care. This movie had a massive effect on me growing up, and that is Pet Sematary, the original 1989 Pet Sematary with Fred Gwynne. This movie strikes every emotion. For those of you who don't know, a family moves to Maine. In a country house in the woods near their home is a pet cemetery. Kind of creepy, right? But that's not the creepy part. The creepy part is miles behind the cemetery, pet cemetery, is an Indian burial ground where whatever you bury there will come back to life. But the trick is it doesn't come back the same. It comes back evil, sinister. And without getting into spoiler territory, some horrible things happen within this family. Some very shocking things that will leave this family with making decisions on what is right, what is wrong, is what is dead should stay dead. And it has some of the creepiest imagery you'll ever see. Of course, Fred Gwynne plays a character named Judd Crandall, and he has very famous one-liners. Sometimes dead is better. The ground is hot. We go on and go through it a lot. But there is a character in this movie, and I know most of you have saw Pet Sematary, but if you haven't, there is a character named Zelda in this movie, and in my opinion, maybe the scariest on-film character ever made. I didn't really get scared of horror movies growing up because I started watching them at such a young age, but this character in particular gave me the worst nightmare I've ever had in my life, to the point where I had trouble sleeping for weeks. And for years, when I watched Pet Sematary, I refused to look at the screen when she was on it because I thought it would trigger me to have that nightmare again. She is just a decrepit character at work. He plays pranks on me all the time. He puts her on the computer screen, so when I log on, she's staring right at me. If you've never seen Zelda, you can go look her up, of course, and hopefully she's not around me at all right now. But I would suggest, if you've never seen her, watch the movie, because it'll be a lot more effective when she comes on to the screen that way.
Yeah, I can definitely see that.
Yeah.
Now for my number 2, is gonna have to be Children of the Corn. Solely for the opening scene at the diner. I can remember the very first time that I ever saw that movie. That scene, after it played out, I can just remember thinking, holy shit,
Yeah.
Where is this gonna go from here?
Yeah.
It had me from the opening scene. Now, unfortunately, by today's standards, it doesn't really hold up.
Yeah.
Now, what I mean, the first half of the movie holds up perfectly.
Yeah.
Now, thanks to better special effects and stuff by today's standards, the last half of the movie, because I just recently watched it not too long ago, doesn't really hold up. But it still makes my list because of the impact it had when I initially saw it, and still to this day, it still is a great movie to watch. But like I said, towards the end of it, you're kind of like, wow, I really thought this was amazing back in the day. Yeah. Kind of like whenever you look at the effects of the graphics of the first Resident Evil. When you first played that game, it scared the shit out of you, and it looked amazing. Go back to play it now, still fun as hell, but you're like, wow, I thought this. Yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, my number 2 Children of the Corn. So
absolutely, that's a great one. Yeah, it's hard with Stephen King. I mean, there's so many notable mentions we could make. From
Dead Zone.
Yeah, from Christine. And let us point out too that this was Stephen King adaptations that dealt with horror. If we were doing just all, I'm sure Shawshank Redemption, Stand by Me, Green Mile, these are all fantastic movies. But this we went towards horror on this. But there's so many great Stephen King movies we could talk all day. But my number one for me was a no-brainer. It was an easy pick. There was nothing that really came close. And that is Stephen King's It. And like John, I'm going to cheat here. I'm putting the 1990s miniseries and the 2017 It Chapter 1, remake or reimagining. I'm just putting them together because there's so many things from both that I love that I can't really pull one apart from the other. Obviously, the newer version has much better effects, even though that is also what deters me from it at times because I'm not a huge fan of the CGI.
Avoid CGI, please.
Yes. Practical effects any day. But it was the first horror novel I ever read other than Goosebumps books. But at 12 years old, I read it. It blew me away. It had everything I could want as a horror fan. I mean, who couldn't love a story about a creature that landed on Earth, takes the form of a demented clown, a killer clown that eats children and craves their fear, and at the same time it can also turn itself into anything it wants to, whatever scares you. So it hits every nod from turning into classic monsters to animals, anything. I've read this novel more than any other novel. It also happens to be my favorite novel of all time. And the movie, the miniseries, I watched it hundreds of times growing up. I still love it to this day. Tim Curry, it's one of the most iconic roles ever put on film. And of course, Bill Skarsgård, I thought, did a terrific job with the new version as well. And of course, It Chapter 2, when you add that to it, I really enjoyed that as well. Saw it on opening night. And it's an amazing horror story. Unfortunately, both the miniseries and the new version still haven't been able to touch a lot of the essence of the novel and a lot of things that they weren't able to take it to where the novel went for various reasons. So I still hope that at some point in time, whether it be through a television series like Netflix or something like that, or maybe we'll have to wait another 27 years to get another It film. I still hope at some point they can really capture the horror of it. Because if they could do that, it would probably be my all-time favorite film. But yeah, It is my number one. That's why I was surprised it was this guy's number 5. But yeah, to me, Pennywise the Clown, the story of It, the Losers Club, nothing comes close. That's my number one.
I mean, I can respect that. I can see that.
Yeah.
So earlier I said that there's 2 movies on this list that made the list just for the sheer emotional impact. And my number 1 was on his list, and that's Pet Sematary. So I don't really need to get too much into it.
The remake, right?
Yeah, definitely the remake.
Yeah.
That'll be a later episode. We had such high hopes for the remake, and it did do some things really well, but there's a lot of things that
I get
kind of
depressed talking about it. I really do.
But the first one, just for the emotional impact, because there's not a lot of horror movies that like hit you at your core. I mean, yeah, you have jump scares, you have like decapitations, that kind of stuff, but Pet Sematary, it hits you at a whole different level that you're not ready for.
Yeah.
And it just for that impact, it's my number 1. All around great movie. The story, some of the acting's a little, but in my opinion, the acting in this is better than the 90s It TV series, and that's kind of why it was a little bit lower on my list. I can't get past some of the acting in that one. And that's also kind of why I prefer the newer It movies. But as far as my number 1, Pet Sematary, it's the emotional impact and just all around. I think that's the best Stephen King adaptation, hands down.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can go wrong either way. There's a reason why both Pet Sematary and It was on both of our lists. But that's it, guys. That is our top 5 Stephen King film adaptations of all time. Please, in the comments, leave your top 5 or whether or not you agree with ours. We're definitely curious to see that.
Tell me I'm crazy for putting It at number 5.
Yeah, tell him he's crazy. And, certainly, guys, like we said before, if you haven't checked out our premiere episode, definitely go back and do that. Get to know us better and also see our top 5 horror films of all time. See if any of these movies are on there. And please, if you enjoyed this, leave a like and subscribe. We'll certainly be coming to you guys with a lot more content here in the future. Like we said, this channel, you're going to see tons of countdowns like you saw today. News, reviews, on-site, Funko hunts, toy NECA hunts, everything you can imagine from going to conventions. That's all coming up, and we certainly plan to bring you so much more content along the way. Thank you for joining us. You've been watching Now Showing with
John?
and Cam. We'll see you guys soon.